In order to make the story more visual, before we continue about the source of their external fire, let's play some pictures about how that star map worked. So here is this golden mean spiral on the plateau at Giza, and here is the geometric relationship between the three major star systems it pointed to. You have, in this perfect 60-degree implosion cone shape, the spin path to Pleiades and Sirius as a 60-degree right angle and declination cone, which is the implosion cone, with Orion at the midheaven, and Earth here is at the center. This cone was called Peshmetan by the Hopis. It was called Deep Space Nine in the movie. It meant 1 less than 10, or the way of the 9. And the wormhole that was created in the gravity wind by the arrangement of these heavy stars was used for the transport, commercial trade wind for star transport. And Earth was located at the foci, so the solar system was valuable politically, among other reasons, for its location in real estate. Here is another picture of how the three pyramids on the Giza Plateau line up like the three belt stars of Orion, and you have this Sphinx at the cross point. And this star map on Orion literally points to a place where, supposing you had just gone to sleep in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, and you were looking for a place in the stars which fit the morphic fractal resonance of where you were on the land, and you would end up wanting to zoom into the stars in a place where there was a pattern fit, where again, by morphic resonance, you could find the place where your magnetism fit the stars from your local terrain, so the squirt gun could work. And as you could see, that where you are pointed to is literally a black hole in the center of the man of the body of Orion, which it's, whether or not it's a black hole, it's at least one of the areas that's most pregnant for starbursts. See, it goes through the three belt stars, Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka, and Bellatrix. And we see that in this place, in Orion, this is where we zoomed in that Grail Cup before, that it appears that something is creating the suction. This is starbursts happening dynamically in NASA footage. And if you asked a physicist what was sucking all the mass in toward a center point to make it look like a living cell being born, the physicist would say increasing gravity. But I'm suggesting to you that what actually creates that, what in part actually creates that suction to center, is the added recursiveness that has made the system self-organizing, which actually requires the insertion of the self-awareness, which we'll later see may be related literally to what is the birth of angels, or star bodies, solar beings. This little animated sequence is about what I call pull yourself together, Osiris. Remember, Osiris's body was missing a penis, which was the projective point of the sperm. If we look at the picture again, we see that we've assembled the pieces of a puzzle like the body of Osiris. I'll just back up a little bit. See how there's puzzle pieces? The metaphor here is that it takes a certain wave mechanic to assemble stars into a form that allows them to have bodies. And that's what we want to talk about here. So back to our story, now that we've looked at a few visuals. The story was, here they were realizing they had lost a glandular source of bliss. And therefore, there was no centering force. And so nothing to engender charge density in their DNA, the implosion that ensouls. One of the stories that's told is many of the fallen one, including some of these Dracos, eventually would have two hearts instead of one, which resulted in a loss of centering force biologically. And this was, in fact, told from the people who met them at Dulce and elsewhere. But the other major thing that happened is they became addicted to eating a replacement for the melatonin serotonin, which was gold powder, the Mana Ormi spice. And the reason gold powder, I believe, works is because the outer valence electron shell of the what they call the noble gases or the noble elements, not unlike palladium, although palladium is not identical, that the outer electron shells, which are called the sp-df subshells, the df subshells is a 10-14 electron array, which is 5-7 donut pair, which is a dodeca-Icasa array in symmetry. So essentially, gold is noble because it is so fractal atomically. It creates implosion at the atomic level. So when you submit it to lots of charge, it turns inside out effectively because it has so much centering force. Where it changes mass, turns white. It looks like popcorn. David Hudson calls it orthomolecularly rearranged. It's white powder. But the wonderful phenomena is that it becomes soluble in water and blood. And that solubility in water and blood allows it to reorient the water molecules around that implosive symmetry, creating electrical implosion at the atomic level in the blood. Now, as we saw, that when you create implosion, you create sorting. So what happens in the blood when you eat gold powder is that all of the magnetic fields which are not sustainable are sorted out. That may sound overly simplistic, but I believe it's literally a description of how you fabricate a technologically immortal immune system. Now, in fact, it was very clearly described biblically and in Dune, and it's also described scientifically in David Hudson, that eating the gold powder drastically lengthens lifespan. In fact, they're joking now that you're only dollars away from immortality. So what was the problem? Why not just eat the gold powder and live forever? Well, this is a problem discovered after millennia by the fallen ones, the Nephites, okay? What happened was that if you rely on an external unifying source to implode your DNA, the addictive gold powder, you eventually have no individuation because the source of the fire is the source of what makes you, you. We call it ident, I tie. What ties the dents together on the soap bubble surface is the phase implosion that locks the harmonics that makes an immune system. In biophysics, it's called structural stability and morphogenesis. It means that every living cell is simply a sum of different waves that are able to nest together because they're phase musical. So if anything out of phase tries to get on the cell membrane, it's canceled out. That's how you get an immune system. So ident, I tie, identity, how to make a dent on the surface of a soap bubble, is this ability to sort. And wherever the fire comes from is what sorts the waves and creates identity. Well, if the source of your fire is outside in instead of inside out, then you use technology instead of emotion eventually to bend stars. This is called the technos or the logos, which is the logos versus technology, which is the essential difference between the Ophanim and the Seraphim in a poetic kind of way, or the fallen ones and those who are still Solarian. The addictive personality, which uses an outside source of fire, begins to create mucus, like those who drink alcohol and take stimulants like coffee and tobacco, because the self-not-self barrier begins to get confused because you start to burn yourself and not know the difference between your not-self if the source of the fire was not internal instead of external. Again, this is how you can tell if a religion is self-empowering, if they say all fire, all power, all God is within you, and you don't need to pay a tax to any priest or anything outside you to access that fire, then that's self-empowerment. Well, when they became addicted to the gold powder, they lost self-empowerment because they lost the source of the fire that first decided how to turn inside out, that started the implosion, that did the sorting. Fire in the heart. Anyway, so here they came here now. Our planet was so well situated in this dodecaconic of these 12 faces of the Pent zodiac that large amounts of gold had precipitated in our grid precisely because the magnetism crossed in that dodecafractal array because we were so well situated with respect to the faces of stars. So The arrangement of our planet so fractally with respect to stars made the capacitance of those planets, those stars, as they affect us astrologically, the proper embedding nutrient for not just gold to form in the mineral veins, but also for the growth and production of self-awareness in general. So astrologically and astronomically, gravity is charge gone fractal. When stars arrange themselves well into a fractal, you create this excellent cookbook for cooking up self-awareness in gene pools, because the embedding is so complete that the gene pools are able to grow up and inhabit the stars which are in our image and likeness. So you had a lot of gold precipitated in the vein structure of Earth. We were considered valuable for our mineral deposits alone. They didn't realize that the gene pool here was also valuable. And so the Orion consortium, as it were, which ruled a high percentage of the inhabitable planetoids in the Orion sector in a reign of terror. Because after they had become rather addicted to this gold powder, this mana ormi spice, what onset was a condition where there was only one source of the fire. It was mechanical. And they became more and more interested in the, what's the TV show, the Calypso? The Techno Calypse, right. That was the TV show that says, you too can become a Borg. It is a privilege to be assimilated. Just insert a chip in your body and you can become like everyone else. Biology is getting behind and machines are getting ahead. Well, that's precisely the sentiment which started the Orion Wars, referred to in Star Trek as the Empire Strikes Back. The Empire Strikes Back, which was essentially a story of those who were in a hive mind, total telepathy culture, which was almost entirely machine-based with little pieces of biology glued in here and there to make it fun, versus a culture of the remnant humanoids who still used some passion and bliss. And they were in part descended from what were called the dog-bird brain, the Dogon, the Wealawa, the bird tribe, the Ophanim versus the Seraphim. So, in the Empire Strikes Back kind of story, the situation is essentially between those who have fallen into this hive mind. The reason they fell into hive mind was because when there's only one source of fire, it phase embeds everyone and you have total telepathy. The problem with total telepathy is that you no longer can imagine yourself separate. So no one gets to experience the agony of separateness. And as a result, no one learns anew the skill to turn inside out and feel outside as if it were inside, we call compassion. So with the end of the birth of new compassion was the end of the birth of new individuation, which was the beginning of total telepathy and hive mind. The hive mind uses only hexagonal structures which are membrane making and incubating, whereas the bliss passion group uses pentagonal structures, which the church says the pent is bad and yet says repent and be saved. We know that penting is simply the process of the golden ratio becoming self-embedding. It's the square root of 5 is how you derive the golden ratio. So it's in 5-ness is in phi net. So this would be an image of that idea of repent and be saved. To embed is to have compassion. And you see how this onset of recursion creates this principle embedding, which is this principle of charge density. Let's look further here at this summary of these principles on the same page. Okay? So this is just another summary before we go on with our story. We've said the heart EKG voltage learns bliss, the result of perfect compassion, which is compression without pain, non-destructive compression. We say that perfect implosion equals inner fire, which is the same as fire. To be self-similar fractal is to feel inside the same as what is felt outside.